All righty. Welcome, everyone, to the daily market wrap, the biggest charts in 30 minutes. My name is David Zimmerman. I'm the founder of DeFi University. And DeFi University is the best place for DeFi, crypto, Bitcoin, Lightning, Nostr education. Probably the best education in the English language. You can find it at zapuniversity.xyz and defiuniversity.xyz. Let's go ahead and hop in. So what we're going to do today is we're going to take a look at some of my favorite digital asset charts. And let me just go ahead and get this into view so that I can see my trading view screen here properly. All right, there we go. Okay, so let's start off with Bitcoin. Seeing as how Bitcoin has made, another couple $1,000s to the downside, another red day to start off the week. Now, I want to begin by zooming out to a weekly here on BTC. And, this pattern, to me, I would start to become a buyer of Bitcoin down here at, call it 58K. Now, why do I have 58K marked on the chart? Well, because if I just throw down that 200-week moving average there, this is the level where I will start to buy Bitcoin. So I'm a buyer of Bitcoin in this zone. Let me go ahead and draw out this zone for everyone from the 200-week moving average all the way down to like 35. So in this zone here, I'll be a big buyer of BTC. I'm going to buy as many Bitcoin as I possibly can down in this zone because my expectation is that the bottom will be put in, and then we get some chop for a couple of months, and then we get the beginning of some green shoots at the end of this year into the beginning of next year. So it's a Bitcoin bear market, and we are, in the middle innings of this Bitcoin bear market. Now, last cycle, Bitcoin actually made it, greater than 30% below its 200-week moving average. That is a pretty big extension to the downside. Now, this cycle, I don't expect us to get 30% below. That would bring it all the way to 36K. I mean, look, anything's possible, but I don't think that is all that likely. So I'm thinking more about like 50K. Like maybe Bitcoin gets down to 49 or 50K, something like that. That's still 14% below the 200-week moving average. And you know what? Why don't we take a look at Bitcoin with more data? Let's get some more data here. So BTC USD, this has more data. And I'm just interested to see during previous Bitcoin bear markets, how extended has Bitcoin gotten below its 200-week moving average in the past? That's what I'm interested to learn here. So this is last cycle, around a 36% extension to the downside below that 200-week moving average. Now, if we just go ahead and measure this extension, so this was, what was that? So we're going to go ahead and measure this. Looks like around 27%. Now, that was a flash crash. Wasn't that the March 2020? Wasn't that the March 2020 crash? And Bitcoin did make it below its 200-week moving average, but just barely. Take a look, all the way back in 2018 and 2019, after that big parabola during the 2017 Bitcoin bull market. Then the crash just brought us down to the 200-week moving average. So that 200-week moving average has been an important line in the sand for Bitcoin for just about its entire existence. Now, if we just go back in time even further here, and we're basically getting to all of the data that we've got on BTC. Man, I bought my first Bitcoin in 2012. I wish I'd held it. Oh my goodness. So just looking for extensions or extensions to the downside below that 200-week moving average, and we just don't see it. So the 200-week moving average held as support in 2019, 2018, and 2019. It held as support. The 200-week moving average was broken in 2020, but immediately recovered. And that turned out to be a great time to buy Bitcoin at that 200-week moving average. Now, last bear cycle, Bitcoin spent, if I just go ahead and measure this, it spent how many weeks below that 200-week moving average. It looks like it's been about 40 weeks, maybe, oh, I don't know, call it 39 or so weeks below the 200-week moving average. So this is the time when you want to be buying Bitcoin, is you want to be buying it at the 200-week or below the 200-week. So we're getting really close. We're getting really close to, a level where you really just want to flip your shorts into longs and start thinking about buying spot. Um, so I think for me, that level comes in at 58, 59K, something like that. If I bring it back on over here to the Binance futures, so I've got that level marked for myself. I'm a buyer of Bitcoin down here between 60, 58, something like that, and all the way down to 36. And in fact, really, you could say all the way down to 32, but I think it's very unlikely that Bitcoin gets a move all the way down to 32K. But hey, it's definitely possible, although unlikely. So I'm a buyer in size at 58K. Let's take a look at ETH. So here's ETH. And you've got to view all of these altcoins through the lens of what Bitcoin is doing. Because if Bitcoin makes a move below its 200-week moving average, well, then all of these alts are going to get smoked. Like, these alts are not going to be able to hold any type of support if Bitcoin is moving below its 200-week. So for me, that means that all altcoins, their bear market lows from last cycle are in play. So, that means that we could see for the entire altcoin space, if I just go down and take a look at total 3. So the total 3 is, market cap excluding Bitcoin and ETH. But if we take a look at total 2, this is market cap just excluding Bitcoin. So if we exclude Bitcoin and then we take a look, this is the altcoins, the altcoin market cap here. I want to go ahead and grab an arrow. And I also want to grab first a horizontal. So let's just throw down that support. So there's support. That is horizontal support for altcoins. Now take a look at where alts are currently trading. This is the market cap, currently sitting at their respective 200-week moving average. But notice how many times this has been tested. Once, twice, 3 times, 4 times. We're at the 5th test. And so if this breaks, there is no support until you get down into this region here. So, with altcoin market cap sitting at 900 billion, we could be about to see the floodgates open to the downside and just see, a precipitous crash here from 900 billion to 420 billion in market cap. So that would be, if we were to measure that, that would be a move to the downside of an additional 50%. So that seems to be about in line with what I'm looking at across all of these different altcoin charts. They all look like sells to me. And it looks like all of them have at least 40 or 50% left to go on the downside, even from these current, relatively depressed prices. So I think that if Bitcoin moves to 50K, and if it breaks its 200-week moving average, which is at 58K, and moves down to 50,000, then I don't see how altcoins won't move all the way down to their bear market lows from last cycle. So that means that most alts are still overvalued by 2x. So they've still got 50% left on the downside. And we can just take a look down the list at all the charts. So, here's ETH. And remember, ETH has this trend line support, but we've got to remember to think in terms of Bitcoin. Like, what could ETH do if Bitcoin moves to 50K? So 50K is below its 200-week moving average. And what would happen to ETH if Bitcoin moves to 50K? Well, 1600 is the level of trend line support for ETH. But if Bitcoin moves to 50K, then there's no way that 1600 holds its support. So that opens up the door to $1,100 ETH or $1,200 ETH, something like that, because that is close to the bear market lows from last cycle. So we might see a double top on the upside and a double bottom on the downside for ETH. So I would be a buyer of ETH at the bottom of this zone at 1,200, simply because if Bitcoin makes a move below its 200-week moving average, then there's no way that Ethereum holds 1,600. It probably moves down to 1,000. Let's take a look at Solana. So, Solana's future is uncertain, in my opinion. I would love to see it work out, but it's trading well below its 200-week moving average, and there's no support until it gets down to $30. So the bear market lows from last cycle in Sol at $8 or so, $9. Could we see those levels get tested again? Yes, we could. And look, if Bitcoin moves to 50K, then I think Sol probably has at some point like a minus 30% day, like just a straight up crash. Maybe if it breaks below its lows from the crash a couple weeks ago, which came in at 67.50, maybe on a break below 67.50, we see it down like $20 or something like that to 47.50, something like that, right around here. It might even just make it in a straight shot in one session down to $35. That wouldn't surprise me at all. This is a very, very volatile altcoin here. So, Solana, in line with all of the other alts, if it makes a move just to the top of its range from last bear cycle, around $35 or so, that's still 58% left in the downside. So that's in line with what we've been seeing from all of the other altcoins. So if we just run down the list here, Tau, one of the favorite AI plays out there, but let's take a look. Tau doesn't really have a whole lot of data. So if we go back, we can only go back to basically the beginning of this bull cycle, the end of last bear cycle, so May-ish timeframe, 2023. So May 2023, that's $35. So that's basically like the target on the downside for this bear cycle for Tau is $35 or $40. So that would mean an additional 76% on the downside. Maybe that's a little overzealous. Maybe we see it move just 50% to the downside, down to $80 or something like that. That makes sense for Tau. And remember, if Bitcoin moves to 50, there's no way that Tau is going to hold above 100. It probably breaks down into the double digits here from the triple digits. Let's take a look at Sui. Sui, another smart contract platform. This one has been moving to the downside. And that's the expectation, is that it tests, again, this one, we don't have a full cycle of data for Sui. So, the lows here from, the real true start of the bull market in Bitcoin that came in, October-ish, beginning of October was the beginning of like the real bull run in this last bull cycle. So that's the law, that's the trough for Sui. So that's where I would expect Sui to find support at first, and that's around 36 cents. So if we just measure that, that's like another 57% to the downside in SUI. That would not surprise me at all. And again, in line with all the rest of them. Here's XRP. So I don't know exactly what XRP does. I can't figure out if this does anything, but the lows from last bear cycle around 30 cents, that would make sense to me. Maybe the first stop for XRP is 75 cents, and then maybe it just makes a move all the way down to 30 cents. That would be 77% of the downside. But even if it makes a move just down to the top of the channel from last bear cycle, then that would still be another 45% of the downside, even from these current depressed prices. So XRP, I'll never be a buyer of XRP. Here's ARB. So we're just going to roll down the list. ARB, 2 cents, maybe. Aave, here we go. Aave, probably in between 50 and 80. This zone down here, because that was the majority of the trading activity last bear cycle in Aave, as it started to form a base and then the next bull. So maybe we see the same exact thing repeat this bear cycle. BNB barely clinging to support here. Now, if or when that support fails, then there's no way this 200-week moving average is going to hold for BNB, because if it doesn't hold for Bitcoin, it's not holding for BNB. So I think if or when this breaks, then maybe you pick up some BNB at $200, something like that. That makes sense for BNB. Here's Arrow. And Arrow, this thing should probably be trading for less than a penny. Maybe a penny, something like that. So, selling Arrow at 29 cents is a great deal because, this thing is worthless, probably goes to a penny. We don't have a full cycle on this. It launched in August. of 2023. So all we've got is like the lows from the beginning of the bull. So those lows, you can't even see the data here. This doesn't have all the data, but it goes back to August of 2023. And it wouldn't surprise me to see Arrow down here, trading for single digit pennies. So Fartcoin, Fartcoin just now today during the session today, starting to break down below its level of support here. And now that it's breaking down again, there's only support once you get down to like 7 cents. So, that's another 50% to the downside in Fartcoin, but this probably goes to zero. Here's Tron, one of the outperformers, but again, still a digital asset. So it's quite extended from its 200-week moving average here. If we measure that extension, Tron has been one of the best performers. And so it's still 80% extended to the upside from its 200-week, which is one of the best, if not the best performer. So this bull cycle, because it held on to its gains and everything else gave it back. So will this touch its 200-week moving average? Probably, probably. So, again, just because this is the outperformer doesn't mean it's immune. It's still a digital asset. So maybe this has less to the downside, less room to the downside than all other altcoins, simply because this has been the outperformer. So maybe we get 36% on the downside because as time passes, this 200-week moving average will continue to move higher. So maybe over the next couple of weeks, we get a test of the 200-week moving average, or maybe it just holds on to its gains. But it looks like a break below, if I throw down this horizontal right here, a break below 27 cents, and there's no support until the 200-week moving average. So Tron is near must-hold territory. AVAX. I don't know exactly what AVAX does because, it's a smart contract platform. They've got 3 chains. The C chain is the EVM chain. And I know that there are games that launch on AVAX, but I don't think that they really launch on AVAX. They just kind of use the AVAX chain, I guess, for payments or in-game stuff. But it hasn't mattered for the token price, not one bit. So yeah, AVAX to me, it looks like it could head towards the lows from not last bear cycle, but 2 bear cycles ago, all the way back in 2020. So yeah, AVAX does not look good here at all. And this is a weekly. So if we just zoom in on this weekly, take a look, this level of horizontal support, which is the last level of support until you get down to like $3. So yeah, AVAX all the way down to $3 this cycle, man. But I'll be buying AVAX in this region here, no doubt about it. ETHFI. I don't know why you would hold this. I don't know. I love EtherFi, the protocol. The product that they have built is phenomenal, but I don't know what the purpose of the token is. So, if this breaks below this horizontal that I've drawn in at roughly 41 cents, which looks like it's a bit of a double bottom, and really you could say that this is an inverse head and shoulders. Although I don't know if the wick counts as the head or not. I guess it is in the eye of the beholder, but there's no way that ETHFi is going to bounce if Bitcoin is moving to its 200-week moving average. So an ETHFi, I don't know, maybe I buy some if it gets down to like, 5 cents or something, maybe, but not quite sure yet. I like the product though. EtherFi, the product, phenomenal product. Here's Doge. And, look, I'm a fan of the idea of like a dog meme coin, but at the same time, I'm not a fan of all of the people that are getting wrecked. Like, I'm not a fan of the fact that people don't understand what this is. And so when you buy a super high volatility meme coin, I want people to understand what they're actually allocating capital to. And I don't think most people do. And they end up getting wrecked because of it. And I really dislike that. So, if Doge didn't exist, I would have no problem with that. But this cycle, I think a reasonable target on the downside for Doge, this bear cycle, is 5 cents. So 5 cents on the downside, even from the current price, is like 40% further to the downside. So still probably quite a bit left on the downside for Doge. Here's SPX, another meme coin that hopefully, I mean, look, I don't want people to lose money on this, but like, you can't, this is a do nothing, valueless meme coin. And this, probably breaks below 21 cents and goes to zero this cycle, this bear cycle. Here's Link. Now, I love Chainlink, the protocol. I love the products that they've built. It's so useful to be able to pull data feeds from RWAs or from anything. But I can't figure out what the purpose of the Link token is. It doesn't seem like there's actual real demand for it. So, the bear market lows from last cycle are the target at roughly $5. If I get an opportunity to buy Link at $5 or below $5, I'll buy it. I'll definitely buy it. But it could even move all the way down to the lows from 2 cycles ago. I think that's less likely, but a move just to the lows from last cycle is 45% to the downside. That's about in line with what we see in other altcoins. Here's XMR. Now, I don't know why you would need to use Monero when you can use Lightning and Nostr for privacy. Same thing with Zcash. But I think that most people just don't know about Lightning and Nostr and how you can, build on Nostr, on Lightning, and just use PTLCs and make yourself anonymous on there. So, XMR and Zcash. I think once more people understand about the privacy layer built on top of Nostr, they'll migrate away from XMR and Zcash. So what I see here is a blow off top and a break of support. And I see the 200-week moving average down at $200. So I would actually be a buyer of Monero below $200, maybe 100 something. Or if I get an opportunity to buy for $100, that'd be great. I'd be a buyer at $100. Here's Ondo. I don't know why anyone would buy this token. Like on-chain toxic sludge. That's U.S. Treasuries, return-free risk. Stuff like that. So yeah, I mean, this is just basically a really big head and shoulders pattern. So wherever the bottom is for this, maybe it's down here, because a break of 19 cents and there's no support for Ondo until it gets down to like 3 cents. So I would just watch this one. I don't think I'll ever buy it. Here's Ray, just a protocol governance token for the Radium DEX over on Solana. And this one, it's trading at 57 cents, probably has some support at 12 cents, or maybe even a little bit lower than that, maybe like 8 cents. Let's take a look at Hype. So I really do like Hyperliquid. And, this is, so far, this is just a flag. This is a really big flag on the weekly, but break down below this trend line support and it moves down to $20. Fail $20 and Hype is going back down to $10. Because look, it's an altcoin. It's not immune. So whatever Bitcoin does is going to ripple through the entire altcoin space. And if Bitcoin, moves to 50K, then there's no way that Hype is going to hold $20. Now, does that mean Hype needs to move to $10? No. But because the reason why I'm a little bit more bullish on Hype than the others is this protocol actually generates real cash flow and revenues. Think of that, right? A Web3 protocol that makes money, and not just makes money, returns those funds to token holders in the form of buybacks and burns. So this one probably has much more room on the downside, but I'm a little bit more bullish Hype than any of the other alts. I also like Tron, because Tron has outperformed. I like Hype because the Hyperliquid protocol generates a ton of free cash flow and returns that to token holders. But most other alts are just kind of meme coins at the end of the day. Let's take a look at Uni. So the Uni token, Uniswap is a very useful protocol, but I think the market is telling us that its token, maybe not so much. So I do see a bit of a head and shoulders pattern here too. You see these similar patterns play out across all alts because they're all so positively correlated. So, you trade 10 alts and you're basically trading all of them. So this here, this level at $1.82, this horizontal, that's the flash crash low from October 10th. It also happens to be the low from November 2020. So if uni gets down to $1.82, that would be a move on the downside of an additional 45%. So, we could definitely see uni down at $1.80 this bear cycle. Here's Pendle. And, Pendle just putting in a bit of a bear flag down here, a little bit of a triangle, like a pause formation on the weekly after basically just crashing. So I really, really like the Pendle protocol. It is, zero coupon bonds on chain. They're basically crypto bonds, those PTs. But the Pendle token, probably has support at 50 cents, which if we just measure this, that's an additional 57% to the downside in line with all of the other altcoins. We take a look at, let me just run down the list. Maybe we take a look at some stuff that we haven't looked at in a while. Injective. This one was super hot and all the rage for what, like a couple of months, and that was it. So I haven't heard of this in months. I've never heard, I haven't heard of anyone building anything cool on this anytime recently. Um, I hope it works, but it seems uncertain. So if I just go ahead and throw down a horizontal at 97 cents, that would be a level to potentially buy INJ, although I'd probably pass on this one. But minus 70% left in the tank on the downside out of Injective. Here's Jasmy. People were bullish on Jasmy, as was I at one point, just because it seemed interesting that they could use their, I think it's like privacy software that they partnered with the government of Japan and Apple to launch on iPhones in Japan. But you've got to ask yourself, why does that mean token go up? Why does that mean, token number go up? Like partnerships are great, but how does that actually accrue value to the token? And if there's no real connection between the protocol and what they're building, the technology, and the token that they've launched, then the token is kind of sort of a meme coin. And I think that's what the vast majority of altcoins actually are, like meme coins of the underlying protocol, where there's very little connection at best. So what I see here for Jasmy is, maybe a return to those flash crash lows at 3/10 of a penny, and maybe even well below that, because that would only be an additional like 30% to the downside. So maybe that's not aggressive of a target enough, aggressive enough of a target. Maybe it moves all the way down to 2.5 tenths of a penny. Take that in for a second. 2.5 tenths of a penny. So maybe you buy $100 of this thing if it gets to 2.5 tenths of a penny, just to keep it as a moon bag or something. Because if it goes from 2/10 of a penny up to its highs from this last bull cycle, that's a nice 2,200%. So maybe you buy $100 of it or $1,000 and see what happens. So JTO. This is what I expect all the rest of the alts to do over the next couple of weeks. Just whoop, something like that, straight down. And then we start to base for the next couple of months into October of this year. Near, breaking below $1 on near. And really, there's no support here until we get nearer to the lows from 2 cycles ago. So near is pushing below its previous bear cycle lows and getting close. It's going to get close, I think, to 50 cents. So 50 cents for near, it is not quite there. So maybe another 40 or 50% on the downside. And, this one, this is, they say this is some type of AI chain, but I don't really get the whole AI part of this. I think that it could just be because I think one of the high profile creators of this chain is also a well-renowned, AI researcher. But how does that make this chain AI? I don't understand that part. But if you were able to pick up some near at 50 cents and it returns to its bull market highs from this previous bull cycle, that'd be a 16x. That's not bad. Take a look at OP. This one just getting dumped. And this is what I expect all altcoins to do and to look like over the next couple of months this year, where it's just down, just down. I've been waiting for some type of a bounce out of Bitcoin, and we haven't really gotten a true bear market rally yet. I guess you could say that this was the bear market rally. It was weak, very weak bear market rally. See, a bear market rally needs to be sharp and violent. It's like a rip your face off type rally. And we didn't really get that after the first crash. We just kind of got a couple of weeks of chopping and then just a couple of like a session on the upside, and that was it, gave it all up. So I'm waiting for some type of bear market rally, and really the resistance level would be 74K, but there's no reason why we need to have a bear market rally. Bitcoin could just move on down to 58 and then continue its move to 50. And alts would just get shellacked down to at least their lows from last bear cycle. But many of them, it looks like they could get well below their lows from last bear cycle, maybe to their lows from 2 bear cycles ago. So, yep, looks like we haven't quite hit the fear and depression phase of the bear cycle. So there's more room left on the downside. I'm just thinking about which coins do I want to buy and when. So I hope that this was valuable to everyone who's able to join live. If you find value in this, please take a look at defiuniversity.xyz. Ton of free DeFi, crypto, Bitcoin, Lightning, Nostr education over there. And we're going to be launching some new products. So Zap University is going to be launched over the next couple of days. We've got a ton of different protocol products that we've been working on, which are going to be launching soon. And we're going to be streaming here on Arena every single day. So, there's a lot of AI content, showing people how to build in Cursor that we're going to be doing here on Arena. And I think that everyone's going to really find a lot of value in the AI content. Learning how to build software is a skill set that will serve you for years. So I appreciate everyone for joining live. If you found value in this, take a look at defiuniversity.xyz, and I will see you all tomorrow. And tomorrow's live stream is at 8:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So Tuesday, Thursday is 8:30 p.m. EST, and Monday, Wednesday, Friday is 7 p.m. EST. So thanks so much for joining live. See you all tomorrow.